Ta-da! Okay, there, that's it. Yes. Volume, lighting, bonnet. Hello. Are you there? I gave you a 5-minute warning. It's steadily been 5 minutes. Okay. There they are. Look. There's people logging in droves. I have orange juice. I don't have snacks. I just ate. I had a sandwich. It was great. It's done. Yes. So it's Alison and I'm back in the living room. And I got my bonnet. And I ain't got many left either because you keep buying them. I have seen some of the people who posted pictures wearing their brand new bonnets, and that was awesome. I'm glad you liked them. I'm ordering more because it's the craziness. So still in A Little House in the Prairie, third book. We're on chapter 9. We just finished chapter 8 about doors because they had no doors. This one is A Fire on the Hearth, which I guess means that Charles does build the fireplace he was going on and on about. And then chapter 10 is A Roof and a Floor, which I guess means he actually builds a house and makes it a roof and a floor, because it was a little vague about when he was going to do that. So we are doing that, logging it. Oh, yes, there's lots of people there, all that. Good. Loving the new lighting. This is like second or third time he used it and like caught onto that, so that's good. Cat is, I think, asleep. So we probably won't get a sudden visit from Morticia storming the video, so that'll be fun. Chapter 9, if you're reading along, Wave 107. Look at you. Yeah, I got my bonnet. Yay! Those went fast. Hey, yeah, the mail. Woo. Sleet nor snow nor COVID-19. Them post-op people, they are working it. That's good. Alrighty then. Fire on the hearth. The hearth. Fireplace. Outside the house, close to the log wall opposite the door, Pa cut away the grass and scraped the ground smooth. He was getting ready to build the fireplace. Good, because they were cooking outside. There were wolves, and they're like, well, we're going to have dinner outside, but there's wolves. But they really need that in the house. Then he and Ma put the wagon box on the wheels again, and Pa hitched up Pet and Patty. The rising sun was shortening all the shadows. Hundreds of meadowlarks were rising from the prairie, singing higher and higher in the air. Their songs came down from the great clear sky like a rain of music. And all over the land, where the grasses waved and murmured under the wind, thousands of little dicky birds clung with their tiny claws to the blossoming weeds and sang their thousands of little songs. And as we established in a previous chapter, a dicky bird, or a dick sissel, goes, dicky, dicky! Which I just like saying. Pet and Patty sniffed the wind and whinnied with joy. Whee! They arched their necks and pawed at the ground because they were eager to go. Pa was whistling while he climbed to the wagon seat and took up the reins. Then he looked down at Laura, who was looking up at him, and he stopped whistling and said, "Want to go along, Laura? You and Mary?" Ma said they could. They climbed up the wheels, clinging to the spokes with their bare toes, and they sat on the high wagon seat beside Pa. Pet and Patty started with a little jump, and the wagon went jolting down the road that Pa's wagon wheels had made. They went down between the bare, reddish-yellow walls of earth, all ridged and wrinkled by forgotten rains. Then they went on across the rolling land of the creek bottoms. Masses of trees covered some of the low, rounded hills, and some of them were grassy open spaces. Deer were lying in the shadows of the trees, and deer were grazing in the sunshine on the green grass. They lifted their heads and pricked their ears, and stood chewing and watching the wagon with their soft, large eyes. All along the road, the wild larkspur was blossoming, pink and blue and white. Birds balanced on yellow plumes of goldenrod, and butterflies were fluttering. Starry daisies lighted the shadows under trees. Squirrels chattered on branches overhead. Squirrels. How do the squirrels go? I don't know. They kind of go tack, 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 tack in my neighborhood. I don't know. They're big squirrels. White-tailed rabbits hopped along the road, and snakes wriggled quickly across it when they heard the wagon coming. Ooh, I hadn't heard snakes mentioned before. I like snakes. Not like poisonous ones, but not poisonous snakes. They're kind of cute. Deep in the lowest valley, the creek was running in the shadow of dirt bluffs. When Laura looked up those bluffs, she couldn't see the prairie grass at all. Trees grew up the bluffs where the earth had crumbled, and where the bare dirt was so steep that trees couldn't grow on it, bushes held on desperately with their roots. Half-naked roots were high above Laura's head. "Where are the Indian camps?" Laura asked Pa. Okay, she will not let it go about these Indians. She's like, "Where are the Indians? Indians? The Indians? Because the Papoose and the Indians." Like every day she asks. He had seen the Indians' deserted camps here among the bluffs, but he was too busy to show them to her now. He must get the rocks to build the fireplace. "You girls can play," he said, "but don't go out of my sight, and don't go into the water, and don't play with snakes. Some of the snakes down here are poison." Okay, see, I was just saying, snakes are cool, except poisonous ones. As Paul says, don't play with the snakes, because you'll die. Now, you notice there's a running thing here. And we may not catch it because we're thinking when we read this as kids and stuff. So Laura's like, "Where are the Indian camps?" And Paul goes, "Oh, I don't know where they are. Okay, as a kid, you take that literally. As an adult, you go, "Oh, hello." He knows perfectly well that there are Indians there, that the Native Americans live over there, and he knows that they're on their land, and he knows that it's a problem. And he knows that eventually they're going to wind up talking to the Indians and Native Americans, and there's going to be issues. But she's 9, and he's going, "Shut up, look over there, a bunny." He's not telling her what is happening with the Indians. Purposely, he's like lying to her because they know. And that's what she keeps saying, "But Ma, isn't it their land? If you don't like them, why did we come to their country?" And Ma says, "Shut up and eat your dinner." And you want to take that literally, like, oh, the parents don't know. No. As a grown-up, you realize, oh, yikes, the parents are in a really uncomfortable position because they know it's wrong, and they know there's a problem, and that the Indians are being pushed off their land, and that they've just moved to this place, and that the treaties and the property lines are really sketchy, and that they may well be completely on illegal land, and that it's an issue. And they know there's a problem, and they're very conflicted. And Pa is quite friendly with the Native Americans and speaks to them all the time, and Ma does not. And it is definitely a point of contention in the household. And Laura keeps bringing it up, but, "Hey, are we going to visit the Indians soon?" And the parents are like, "Shut up, shut up, shut up." And as kids, we just like kind of go, whoosh, we like Mrs. Oh, Papoose. But as an adult, you go, oh, hello. Laura Ingalls Wilder is actually making a statement about the conflict and the terrible treatment of Native Americans. Ta-da! See, there you go. So you have to read this like kind of like a grown-up, nothing. And then the dicky birds went dicky, and what are you going to do? So don't play with snakes, because they can bite you, and they're poison. So Laura and Mary played by the creek, while Pa dug the rocks he wanted and loaded them into the wagon. They watched long-legged water bugs skate over the glassy still pools. They ran along the bank to scare the frogs. Don't scare the frogs. They like frogs. And laughed when the green-coated frogs with their white vests plopped into the water. Oh, those are pretty, those kind of frogs. They listened to the wood pigeons call among the trees and the brown thrush singing. I can't do impressions of those. I don't know how the brown thrush sounds. I presume the pigeons go, coo, coo. They saw the little minnows swimming all together in the shallow places where the creek ran sparkling. I'm not getting that. The minnows were thin gray shadows in the rippling water. Only now and again one minnow flashed the sunshine from its silvery belly. There was no wind along the creek. The air was still and drowsy warm. It smelled of damp roots and mud, and it was full of the sound of rustling leaves and of the water running. In the muddy places, where deer's tracks were thick and every hoofprint held water, swarms of mosquitoes rose up with a keen, sharp buzzing. Uh-oh. Laura and Mary slapped at mosquitoes on their faces and necks and hands and legs and wished they could go wading. They were so hot and the water looked so cool. Laura was sure it would do no harm just to dip one foot in it, and when Pa's back was turned, she almost did it. Mosquitoes. The family that in last chapter had fever and ague, which is malaria. And they keep talking about, oh yeah, the night air. No, the mosquitoes! It's the mosquitoes that are biting them. that have malaria. Okay, they're going to get malaria. All right. Laura, said Pa, and she snatched the naughty foot back. Stand her naughty foot out of the water. If you girls want to go wading, Pa said, you can do it in that shallow place. Don't go in over your ankles. Mary waited only a little while. She said the gravel hurt her feet, and she sat on a log and patiently slapped at mosquitoes. Malaria. But Laura slapped and kept on wading. When she stepped, the gravel hurt her feet. When she stood still, the tiny minnows swarmed about her toes and nibbled them with their tiny mouths. It was a funny, squiggling feeling. Laura tried to catch a minnow, but she only got the hem of her dress wet. So the minnows are like feet nibbling. Have you seen those places that do the pedicures with the fish? I saw them in the news, the people that put their feet in this water and they have little fishies that eat the dead skin off your toes and feet. That's what she was doing. Gross. Okay. Then the wagon was loaded. Pa called, "Come along, girls." And they climbed to the wagon seat again and rode away from the creek. Up through the woods and hills they rode again to the high prairie where the winds were always blowing and the grasses seemed to sing and whisper and laugh. They had had a wonderful time in the creek bottoms, but Laura liked the high prairie best. The prairie was so wide and sweet and clean. That afternoon, Ma sat sewing in the shade of the house, and baby Carrie played on the quilt beside her, while Laura and Mary watched Pa build the fireplace. Oh, they're in the creek. Look, there she's in the creek. That's Laura with the minnows in the creek, minnows. And that's Mary. She almost looked like Nellie Oleson there. Mary's sitting on a log being overly good, because she's way too good. So they finally built this fireplace. First, he mixed clay and water to a beautiful thick mud in the Mustang's water bucket. He let Laura stir the mud while he laid a row of rocks around 3 sides of the space he had cleared by the house wall. Then, with a wooden paddle, he spread the mud over the rocks. In the mud, he laid another row of rocks, and plastered them over the top and down the inside with more mud. Because, as they mentioned, they're driving through that area by the creek, clay. So it's not just like regular boar mud. It's clay. It's like adobe. The Indians use. You can build stuff with these rocks and this clay. He made a box on the ground. 3 sides of the box were made of rocks and mud, and the other side was the log wall of the house. So he built it just right up against the house, and against like he did with the door. He just built the house and then cut the door into it, so he's flush against the wall there. See, there, why, look. There, he's like exhausted, and he's built it right up against the wall there. So there you go. With rocks and mud, and more rocks and more mud, he built the walls as high as Laura's chin. Then, on the walls, close against the house, he laid a log. He plastered the log all over with mud. After that, he built up rocks and mud on top of that log. He was making the chimney now, and he made it smaller and smaller. He had to go to the creek for more rocks. Laura and Mary could not go again because Ma said the damp air might give them a fever. No, it's not the damp air. It's the mosquitoes. Hello, germ theory of disease. But it was the 1870s. We didn't know. Mary sat beside Ma and sewed another block of her 9-patch quilt. But Laura mixed another bucket full of mud. And she's been quite helpful. Next day, Pa built the chimney as high as the house wall, so the chimney would go all the way up there. Does that have a picture of the chimney? No, we do not have a picture of the chimney, but there you go. They had to build a chimney all the way up past the roof. Then he stood and looked at it. He ran his fingers through his hair. "You look like a wild man, Charles," Ma said. "You're standing your hair all on end." "It stands on end anyway, Caroline," Pa answered. "When I was courting you, it never would lie down, no matter how much I slicked it with bear grease." Ew. So, we're used to the show with the very handsome Michael Landon, whose hair did stand on end. But according to this Charles, when he was dating Caroline, slicked his hair down with bear grease. What did that smell like? It's like, and she married him. Okie dokie, I don't know. He threw himself down on the grass at her feet. Plumb tuckered out, lifting rocks up there. Here you see, he's plumb tuckered out, and has no bear grease to slick back his hair. You've done well to build that chimney up so high all by yourself, Ma said. She ran her hand through his hair and stood it up more than ever. Why don't you make it stick and daub the rest of the way? She asked him, being an easier method, I guess. Well, it would be easier, he admitted. I'm blamed if I don't believe I will. He jumped up. Ma said, oh, stay here in the shade and rest a while. But he shook his head. No use lazing here while there's work to be done, Caroline. Yeah, it's true. The sooner I get the fireplace done, the sooner you can do your cooking inside out of the wind and away from wolves. He hauled saplings from the woods, and he cut and notched them and laid them up like the walls of the house on top of the stone chimney. As he laid them, he plastered them well with mud, and that finished the chimney. Then he came into the house, and with his axe and saw, he cut a hole in the wall. He cut away the logs that made the fourth wall at the bottom of the chimney, and there was the fireplace. It was large enough for Laura and Mary and baby Carrie to sit in. Its bottom was the ground that Pa had cleared of grass, and its front was the space where Pa had cut away the logs. Across the top of the space was the log that Pa had plastered all over with mud. It's huge, like a walk-in fireplace. Huge, because, cooking it. On each side, Pa pegged a thick slab of green oak against the cut ends of the logs. Then by the upper corners of the fireplace, he pegged chunks of oak to the wall, and on these he laid an oak slab and pegged it firmly. That was the mantel shelf. See, he built a real thing because he made wood that would burn the green, and then there's the shelf, so it's a proper thing. But it's huge, so she can walk in and have pots cooking and everything. As soon as it was done, Ma sat in the middle of the mantel shelf, the little china woman she had brought from the big woods. The famous china doll, Ma's china doll, which we had a little china on the show, even, when Pa finished the fireplace. Ma puts the little china doll up there. And you can buy little replicas of the china doll in Walnut Grove and DeSmet and all of the Prairie sites out there in Missouri and Minnesota and South Dakota, all the stores. And if you go online to the Laura Ingalls Wilder Museum in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, this is like walnutgrove.org, the Walnut Grove site, you can get that little china doll, and they're adorable. You put it up in your hand, they're cute. There it is. The little china woman had come all the way and had not been broken. She stood on the mantel shelf with her little china shoes and her wide china skirts and her tight china bodice and her pink cheeks and blue eyes and golden hair, all made of china. Then Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura stood and admired the fireplace. Only Carrie did not care about it. She pointed at the little china woman and yelled when Mary and Laura told her no one but Ma could touch it. You'll have to be careful with your fire, Caroline, Pa said. Well, duh. We don't want sparks going up the chimney to set the roof on fire. No, we don't. That cloth would burn easy. I'll split out some clapboards as soon as I can and make a roof you won't have to worry about. She built a chimney first, but they have a big piece of sheet for a roof. I don't know, maybe you need to build the roof same time you build the chimney. Charles has trouble with these things, doors, important stuff. I don't know. So Ma carefully built a little fire in the new fireplace, and she roasted a prairie hen for supper. And that evening they ate in the house, which is cool, because outside are wolves. They sat at table by the western window. Pa had quickly made the table of 2 slabs of oak. Oh, he made that table quick enough. 2 slabs of oak. One end of the slab stuck in a crack in the wall, and the other end rested on short upright logs. Pa had smoothed the slabs with his axe, and the table was very nice when Ma spread a cloth over it. Oh, he made a breakfast nook thing with the table that comes out of the wall. That's pretty darn clever, actually. The chairs were chunks of big logs. The floor was the earth that Ma had swept clean with her willow bough broom. On the floor in the corners, the beds were neat under their patchwork quilts. The rays of the setting sun came through the window and filled the house with golden light. Outside and far, far away to the pink edge of the sky, the wind went blowing and the wild grasses waved. Inside, the house was pleasant. The good roast chicken was juicy in Laura's mouth. Her hands and face were washed. Her hair was combed, her napkin was tied around her neck. She sat up straight on the round end of the log and used her knife and fork nicely, as Ma had taught her. She did not say anything because children must not speak at table until they are spoken to. But she looked at Pa and Ma and Mary and a baby Carrie in Ma's lap, and she felt contented. It was nice to be living in a house again. I should think so. I mean, the Indians and wolves and storms and it's dangerous. But now they have a door. They have a door that locks, and they have a fireplace. So they're not going to freeze to death in the winter, but they do need a roof because otherwise they will freeze to death and things will get in. So when just it's the invention of the honey-do list. It is. It is the first honey-do list. Caroline telling Charles, and then you need a roof and you need a door. Well, by golly, what's the next chapter? A roof and a floor. Because I'm not sweeping a dirt floor with a broom. No, I wouldn't do it. But there you go. She's gonna get a real floor and a real roof. All day long, every day, Laura and Mary were busy. When the dishes were washed and the beds made, there was always plenty to do, and to see, and to listen to. They hunted for birds' nests in the tall grass, and when they found them, the mother birds squawked and scolded. Sometimes they touched a nest gently, and all in an instant, a nest full of downiness became a nest full of wide gaping beaks, hungrily squawking. Ah, ah, ah. Then the mother bird scolded like anything, and Mary and Laura quietly went away because they did not want to worry her too much. Well, nowadays they tell you, God, don't touch a baby bird's nest. Oh, no, terrible, terrible. In the tall grass, they lay still as mice and watched flocks of little prairie chickens running and pecking around their anxiously clucking smooth brown mothers. Prairie chickens, prairie chickens, prairie chickens, and they're being quiet as mice, and they're scaring birds. That's good. Don't play with snakes. They watched striped snakes rippling between the grass stems, or lying so still that only their tiny, flickering tongues and glittering eyes showed that they were alive. I like snakes. I know I'm a giant weirdo. I like snakes. I've had a couple pet snakes years ago. I had a pet boa constrictor. It was a pet boa constrictor. It had been a pet boa constrictor. It wasn't straight from the jungle. It was obviously not poisonous, and it had been around a lot of people. It was like super, super chill, domesticated. It just it basically liked to hang out and watch television. That's what it did. It was not like a particularly wild, dangerous creature, poor thing. And I took as good care as I could, and I fed it live food. Didn't make it eat dead food. They like live food. I know. It's like, that's kind of, keeping snakes is weird. And then eventually, poor snaky snake, Astarte, very exotic. I couldn't keep her. So I gave her to someone else who had a big old place. They had snakes, and I don't know where the heck the poor thing is. They don't live that long. They live longer in captivity in the wild, only because other things don't eat them. That's pretty much it. It's being a snake is a hard life. No legs, no arms. It's hard. Snakes. But little snakes are cute. They're adorable. These snakes were not poisonous because the glittering eyes showed they were alive. They were garter snakes and would not hurt anybody. But Laura and Mary did not touch them. Smart. Ma said snakes were best left alone because some snakes would bite, and it was better to be safe than sorry. And it is better when an animal's in the wild. Oh, for heaven's sake, leave the poor things alone. You leave the snakes alone. Have I played with garter snakes? No. Okay, so Melissa Gilbert, me and Melissa Gilbert, on the set of Little House. We were up in Northern California, near Sonora. This is where all those episodes were in the river, where there was a train or mountain. As we flew to Sonora and went out to this place. It was Twain, Hearth, and Angel's Flight. Gorgeous place with mountains and stuff. And a lot of snakes, little garter snakes. And we were walking around the makeup trailers, and we found a whole bunch of garter snakes. And being horrid little children we were, we picked them up. We should have left them, but we picked them up. And we put, Melissa said, one between each finger and a couple in our hair. They didn't bite. They should have bit us. I got a hair. And then we came around the corner, and Gladys, the hairdresser, lovely woman, not a fan of snakes, and we came around the corner with snakes in our hair and in our hands, and she screamed. I remember her cup. She tossed her cup of coffee. Her coffee went up. I can picture. She went wah with her coffee and screamed, and we scared her. And we had to say we're sorry because we didn't really want to give poor Gladys a heart attack. It was kind of funny, but we liked Gladys and we didn't want to terrorize the poor woman, so we put the snakes away. But yes, if you see snakes in the wild, leave the poor things alone because they're snakes, and they don't know you, and and they could bite, and many snakes are poisonous and will kill you. So yeah, but little garter snakes are cool, but just let them go. Critters. Sometimes there'd be a great gray rabbit, so still in the lights and shadows of a grass clump that you were near enough to touch him before you saw him. Then, if you were very quiet, you might stand a long time looking at him. His round eyes stared at yours without meaning anything. Well, I guess it's a rabbit, right? So he's like, whoa. His nose wiggled and sunlight was rosy through his long ears. Can't do that. And had delicate veins in them and the softest short fur on their outsides. Oh, bunnies. The rest of his fur was so thick and soft that at last you couldn't help trying very carefully to touch it. Pet the bunny, pet the bunny, pet the bunny. Then he was gone in a flash, and the place where he'd been sitting was hollowed and smooth and still warm from his warm behind. Laura and Mary are running around like feeling the grass going, oh, the bunny butts. The bunny butts have warmed the grass. These girls had way too much time on their hands. I'm sorry. Yeah. All the time, of course, Laura or Mary was minding baby Carrie, except when she had her afternoon nap, which apparently took all day because, keeps us asleep. Then they sat and soaked in the sunshine and the wind until Laura forgot that the baby was sleeping. She jumped up and ran and shouted till Ma came to the door and said, "Dear me, Laura, must you yell like an Indian? I declare," Ma said. If you girls aren't getting to look like Indians, can I never teach you to keep your sunbonnets on?" Now, as we know, Ma, not a fan of Native Americans, quite rude, but bonnets. Now, see, there you go. That's what the whole hoopla is about the sunbonnets and why these are so popular. So popular in the 1800s and so popular now. Because in addition to being adorable and hilarious to wear, oh, I have a bonnet. Sun, check this out. No sunburned scalp, your hair. Some of you may be coloring your hair now. I know I am. And you want to protect it from sun. And then if you have roots, hey, there you go, no root problem. But it does. It keeps the sun off the part that's right here around the eyes where you're going to get sun damage and wrinkle, like here in your nose. If you go right like this, if it's really sun, you don't get sun damage on your skin. Have you noticed? I'm just saying, have you noticed that the actresses from Little House on the Prairie, you've seen many of us in interviews and on TV, that we all have surprisingly good skin? Because the show premiered in 1974. That's more than 45 years ago. That's a long time ago. And we were stomping. You saw us all on location on the show. We were in Simi Valley. It was very hot and sunny. You saw the sun beating down on us while we were filming. And yet, not just me, you've seen the other girls. Beautiful, un-sun damaging bonnets. I'm telling you. Bonnets. Fountain of youth, babe. Stay out of the sun. Wear your bonnet. Hey, for sure. It's true. So she's saying, wear your sunbonnet. You look like an Indian. Horrors. Pa was up on the house wall beginning the roof. He looked down at them and laughed. One little Indian, two little Indians, three little Indians, he sang softly. Oh, wait, no, only two. You make three, Mary said to him. You're brown, too. But you aren't little, Pa, said Laura. Pa, oh no, again. When are we going to see a papoose? Again with the papoose? No. Goodness, Ma exclaimed. What do you want to see an Indian baby for? Put on your sunbonnet now and forget such nonsense. Now, to her credit, Ma, who's usually the one being really racist and terrible, actually just said, it's an Indian, it's a baby. The papoose, it's a baby, it's a person. Thank you. Laura's sunbonnet hung down her back. She pulled it up by its strings, and its sides came past her cheeks. When her sunbonnet was on, she could see only what was in front of her. And that was why she was always pushing it back and letting it hang by its strings tied around her throat. She put her sunbonnet on when Ma told her to. But she did not forget that papoose. This was Indian country, and she didn't know why she didn't see Indians. She knew she would see them sometime, though Pa said so, but she was getting tired of waiting. Pa had taken the canvas wagon top off the house, and now he was ready to put the roof on. For days and days he had been hauling logs from the creek bottom, again, and splitting them into thin, long slabs. Piles of slabs lay all around the house, and slabs stood against it. "Come out of the house, Caroline," he said. "I don't want to risk anything falling on you or Carrie." Again, because when they were building the house, he dropped a large log on Ma's foot, and she was seriously injured. So when he says, "Please step out so nothing falls on you," that would be, "I don't drop anything on you." Again. So, because we got lucky last time. "Wait, Charles, till I put away the China shepherdess." Smart. Ma answered. In a minute she came out with a quilt and her mending and baby Carrie. She spread the quilt on the shady grass by the stable and sat there to do her mending and watch Carrie play. And smartly took the little China doll off the mantelpiece, because it's meant to be unbroken, because Pa was going to get up on the roof and go crashing around with hammers and things and pegs and slabs of wood, and like he, dropping logs. There's no telling. Logs, slabs of wood, tiles, we don't know what he's going to drop, and he's going to bust that poor China doll. So she knows better. Ma knows better. Pa reached down and pulled up a slab. He laid it across the ends of the sapling rafters. Its edge stuck out beyond the wall. Then Pa put some nails in his mouth and took his hammer out of his belt, and he began to nail the slab to the rafters. Mr. Edwards had lent him the nails. See, they're smart. See, I was just going to say, hey, wait a minute, he didn't have any nails when he built the door. He said, I don't have any nails. I will use pegs. But now he has a mouthful of nails because Mr. Edwards, old Dan Tucker, Mr. Edwards, has brought nails. They had met in the woods. Again. What is he doing out of the woods? They had met in the woods where they were both chopping down trees, and Mr. Edwards had insisted that Pa borrow the nails for the roof. That's what I call a good neighbor, Pa said when he told Ma about it. Yes, said Ma, but I don't like to be beholden, not even to the best of neighbors. Nor I, Pa replied. I've never been beholden to any man yet, and I never will be. But neighborliness is another matter, and I'll pay him back every nail as soon as I can make the trip to independence. They were big on that. They didn't like things like, they did not like credit and borrowing and stuff, because, it's the 1800s and times were hard, and if you got beholden to someone, you could, wind up in servitude, indentured servants could get ugly. So they were like, But, as Pa said, no, neighbors. We're still allowed to help our neighbors. That's not charity, that's not beholden. You can still go next door and go, hey, you want some nails? You build a roof. Here, have some nails. That's still perfectly okay. And he'll get him nails when he goes to town. Perfectly fine. Now, Pa carefully took the nails, one by one from his mouth, and with ringing blows of the hammer, he drove them into the slabs. It was much quicker than drilling holes and whittling pegs and driving them into the holes, which is why we invented nails. But every now and then a nail sprang away from the tough oak when the hammer hit it, and if Pa was not holding it firmly, it went sailing through the air. Ow. And look, here he's doing it. Look at that. He is putting that, it's big. He's putting by himself. Now we've seen, the Amish are always having barn racing, and we've seen where a bunch of guys get up on a roof. He's by himself. He's doing this. Terrible. Oh my. So then Mary and Laura, but they were helpful. Mary and Laura watched it fall, and they searched in the grass till they found it. Sometimes it was bent. Then Pa carefully pounded it straight again. It would never do to lose or waste a nail. So when they fell, they'd go get them and bend them out there. When Pa had nailed down 2 slabs, he got up on them. He laid and nailed more slabs all the way up to the top of the rafters. The edge of each slab lapped over the edge of the slab below it. It's a roof. Then he began again on the other side of the house, and he laid the roof all the way up from that side. A little crack was left between the highest slab, so Pa made a little trough of 2 slabs, and he nailed this trough firmly upside down over the crack. Made little thing. The roof was done. The house was darker than it had been, because no light came through the slabs. There was not one single crack that would let rain come in. Good. You have done a splendid job, Charles, Ma said, and I'm thankful to have a good roof over my head. You shall have furniture, too, as fine as I can make it, Pa replied. I'll make a bedstead as soon as the floor is laid. Floor! Yes. He began again to haul logs. Poor guy. Day after day he hauled logs. He did not even stop hauling logs to go hunting. He took his gun on the wagon and brought back at night whatever meat he'd shot from the wagon seat. When he had hauled enough logs to make the floor, he began to split them. I don't know, is it more logs to make the floor than the roof? I don't know these things. He split each log straight down the middle. Laura liked to sit on the wood pile and watch. First, with a mighty blow of his axe, he split the butt of the log. Into the crack he slipped the thin edge of an iron wedge. Then he wrenched the axe out of the log and drove the wedge deeper into the crack. The tough wood split a little farther. Tools, very good, use of tools. All the way up the log, Pa fought that tough oak. Because it's oak. This is not just, it's oak, it's not some soft wood here. He struck with his axe into the crack. He drove blocks of wood into it and moved the iron wedge higher. Little by little, he followed the crack up the log. He swung the axe high and brought it down with a great swing and a grunt from his chest. Ugh! The axe whizzed and struck. Plung! It always struck exactly where Pa wanted it to. Didn't we have an episode? We did. We had an episode with the axe thing, the wood chopping. It was the Founders Day picnic, and it was the Pa and the old guy. Forrest Tucker was the actor, Forrest Tucker. And they were, the bull of the woods, I'm bull of the woods. And they were chopping the wood. And that was the whole thing, Pa going, her, clang. And it's like, macho, very manly things they're doing. At last, with a tearing, cracking sound, the whole log split. Its two halves lay on the ground, showing the tree's pale insides and the darker streak up the middle. Then Pa wiped the sweat from his forehead. He took a fresh grip on the axe, and he tackled another log. One day, the last log was split, and next morning Pa began to lay the floor. He dragged the logs into the house and laid them one by one, flat side up. With his spade, he scraped the ground underneath and fitted the round side of the log firmly down into it. With his axe, he trimmed away the edge of bark and cut the wood straight so that each log fitted against the next with hardly a crack between them. Then he took the head of the axe in his hand, and with little careful blows, he smoothed the wood. He squinted along the log to see that the surface was straight and true. He took off last little bits here and there. Finally, he ran his hand over the smoothness and nodded. Not a splinter, he said. That'll be all right for little bare feet to run over. He left that log fitted into its place and dragged in another. When he came to the fireplace, he used shorter logs. He left a space of bare earth for hearth so that when sparks or coals popped out of the fire, they would not burn the floor. Again, smart people. One day the floor was done. It was smooth and firm and hard, a good floor of solid oak that would last, Pa said, forever. You can't beat a good puncheon floor, he said. And Ma said she was glad to be up off the dirt. She put the little China woman on the mantel shelf and spread a red check cloth on the table. All the banging and hammering is done, so she's like, oh, finally, puts the little China thing back on the mantel because he's done banging things with an axe all day. But it took longer. It took longer to build the floor than the roof because the floor had to be smooth. Very, very good. Very cool. There, she said. Now we're living like civilized folks again. Harumph. After that, Pa filled the cracks in the walls. Ooh, definitely a good idea before winter. He drove thin strips of wood into them and plastered them well with mud, filling every chink. That's a good job, Ma said. That chinking will keep out the wind, no matter how hard it blows. Pa stopped whistling to smile at her. He slapped the last bit of mud between the logs and smoothed it and set down the bucket. At last, the house was finished. I wish we had glass for the windows, Pa said. Oh, is he again, he's finally done. And he's like, windows. I don't know. But look, it's great. There you go. That's so much better. They can live in there, and they won't freeze to death. They won't freeze, and it'll be much better. Because yikes, they were going to freeze. There was holes in the walls. It's bad. But now he wants glass in the windows. We don't need glass, Charles, said Ma. Just the same, if I do well with my hunting and trapping this winter, I'm going to get some glass in Independence next spring, said Pa, and hang the expense. Hang the expense, he says. Pa's being pretty, he's a bit of a spendthrift there. He's being very wild and impulsive. Glass windows would be nice if we can afford them, Ma said, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. They were all happy that night. The fire on the hearth was pleasant, for on the high prairie even the summer nights were cool. The red check cloth was on the table, the little china woman glimmered on the mantel shelf, and the new floor was golden in the flickering firelight. Outside the night was large and full of stars. Pa sat for a long time in the doorway and played his fiddle and sang to Mary and Laura and Mary and Laura and Ma in the house and to the starry night outside. Oh, I am like so relieved because it was kind of making me like OCD nervous that they were in that house with no floor and no real roof and holes in the walls. It was because I was like, it's gonna rain. It'll get cold. The wolves will come back. So I admit, I can sleep tonight that they finally got the roof on the thing and the door, the fireplace. Much, much better. Well, that's two whole chapters. Now tomorrow, gonna get crazy again because tomorrow is chapter 11, Indians in the house. Well, you know, Ma's gonna have herself a fit because you know how she feels about the Native Americans. So there's going to be a little confrontation with the people who actually own the land. Visit from the landlord. Really should be the title, but there you go. So we'll do this again tomorrow, and we'll do it again 1:30. And tomorrow's crazy. I have interviews. People want to ask me things. So I'll be doing that, but I will be here. And thank you. Yes, I like the blue as well myself. Thank you. Again, I'm ordering more bonnets. I'm doing things. I'll put it up on my Facebook, but on May 9th, I'm going to be doing a show. I'm going to show, because I was going to go to New York and do a show, on stage, like in a theater with people. And I can't do that. But what I'm going to do is do a little show in the living room. We'll have a fancy backdrop. It'll be lovely. We'll do a little show in the living room, and that will go out. And there's a service, and they do this, and they put your shows out, and people can buy tickets, and it's for much, much less than you would buy a ticket to see me, like at a regular place. Because hey, you can sit on your couch in your pajamas with popcorn and watch me. It'll be a screen. So lots of stuff coming up. Hang on to your bonnets. Wear your little masks. Wash your little hands. Stay safe, get some rest, and see you tomorrow.